She stopped replying, left you on read, and suddenly the silence felt louder than any rejection you had ever heard. But what if that silence wasn't the end of your story with her? What if it was the exact moment everything could still change? Most men never learn the real reason women pull away. They think it's about looks, money, or saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. The truth is much deeper and much more painful. When a woman loses interest, it is rarely about you not being enough. It is almost always about you not being rooted enough in yourself. The moment you start chasing, explaining, or trying to convince her to want you, something in her nervous system registers you as unsafe. Not because you are dangerous, but because your self-worth appears to depend on her response. This is the first hidden truth they never wanted you to understand about female psychology. A woman's attraction is not primarily logical, it is deeply psychological and physiological. She is constantly reading whether your sense of value comes from within or from her validation. When she senses the latter, her interest fades, not because she is cruel, but because her nervous system is wired to move toward emotional stability, not emotional dependency. The biggest mistake men make when she seems uninterested is to double down on effort. More texts, more explanations, more attempts to show her why she should want you. Each attempt screams the same unspoken message: I need you to choose me so I can feel worthy. And that message is exactly what kills the attraction. Women have been trained by life to detect neediness long before it becomes obvious. They feel it in the tone of your messages, the eagerness in your voice, the way you become overly available the moment they pull back. What changes everything is not a technique, it is a complete internal shift. The moment you stop trying to win her and start becoming the kind of man who doesn't need to win anyone, her perception of you begins to change. This is not games. This is self-mastery. It is the difference between a man who reacts to her behavior and a man who remains grounded in his own value regardless of her behavior. Female psychology responds powerfully to emotional steadiness. When a woman pulls away and you respond by becoming more grounded in yourself, more focused on your purpose, more respectful of your own time, something shifts in how she sees you. You stop being another man who falls apart when she creates distance. You become the rare man who becomes stronger when she creates distance. That strength is magnetic because it is so rare. The reason this truth feels heavy is because it forces you to look at yourself instead of blaming her. Every time you have felt rejected, there was a part of you that made her rejection mean something about your worth. That is the real problem. Not her lack of interest, your attachment to her interest. When you detach your worth from her response, you become free in a way most men never experience. And that freedom is incredibly attractive to women who have spent their lives managing fragile male egos. Women listening to this already know what I am talking about. Many of you have pulled away from good men simply because their emotional state depended too heavily on your attention. You felt the pressure of being someone's source of validation, and it exhausted you. You wanted to want them, but the weight of their need made genuine desire impossible. The men who learned to stand on their own became the ones you couldn't stop thinking about. The psychological mechanism here is simple but powerful. When a woman senses that your happiness, your confidence, and your sense of self do not depend on her, she no longer feels responsible for your emotional state. That freedom allows her nervous system to relax and her attraction to emerge naturally. This is why the same man can be ignored by one woman and pursued by another. The difference is not the woman. The difference is how grounded the man is in his own value. This is the part they never taught you in dating advice. The real game was never about getting her interested. The real game was about becoming so rooted in yourself that her interest becomes a byproduct instead of the goal. When you make that shift, everything changes. Your texts become calmer, your presence becomes stronger, your life becomes more fulfilling even if she never responds. If you are sitting with the pain of another woman pulling away, understand that this moment is not a rejection. It is an opportunity to finally become the man you were meant to be. The man who does not fall apart when a woman creates distance. The man who uses that distance to build himself stronger. The man whose value comes from within instead of from her reply. Her lack of interest is not the end. It is the perfect mirror showing you exactly where your real work begins. You became the nice guy who never caused tension, always agreed, and made sure she was comfortable. Yet the more you softened yourself, the further she drifted, leaving you wondering why being good wasn't enough. This is the second hidden truth about female psychology that most men discover too late. When a woman starts losing interest, it is often not because you were too strong, but because you became too safe in the wrong way. You traded your natural edge for constant agreement. You stopped leading and started following. You became emotionally available in a way that felt more like emotional dependence than emotional strength, and her attraction quietly died in that exchange. Women do not lose interest in good men. They lose interest in men who lose themselves trying to be good. The nervous system of a healthy woman responds to polarity. She is looking for the contrast between her softness and your steadiness, between her emotional depth and your grounded presence. When you erase that contrast to become completely agreeable and conflict avoidant, you remove the very tension that creates desire. What changes everything is understanding that being a strong man and being a loving man are not opposites. The man who maintains his boundaries, his purpose, and his self-respect while still showing genuine care is the man who creates lasting attraction. This is not about being cold or arrogant. It is about refusing to abandon yourself in order to keep her comfortable. Women test for this constantly, not because they want to play games, but because their survival depends on identifying men who can hold their own frame when life gets difficult. The psychological mechanism here is rooted in thousands of years of evolutionary wiring. A woman's nervous system is scanning for a man who can lead without dominating, protect without controlling, and desire without becoming needy. When you become overly accommodating, you fail that test. She begins to feel like she has to manage the relationship emotionally. She starts carrying both roles, and no matter how much she likes you as a person, her attraction fades because she cannot respect a man she has to emotionally parent. This truth is especially painful for men who pride themselves on being kind. You thought being nice meant never causing tension, never having strong opinions, never saying no. In reality, that version of nice often signals weak boundaries and low self-worth. Women feel this at a subconscious level. They may enjoy your company, they may even care about you, but something essential is missing. The feeling that you are a man who knows who he is and is not willing to erase himself for their approval. The women listening understand this deeply. Many of you have pulled away from men who became too nice, too available, too agreeable. You told yourselves it wasn't their fault. You said the spark just died. But the truth was simpler. You stopped feeling the presence of a man and started feeling the presence of a caretaker. The loss of polarity created emotional flatness that no amount of kindness could overcome. What changes everything is learning to hold both warmth and strength at the same time, to be kind without being weak, to be respectful without being spineless, to care deeply without making her the center of your identity. This balance is rare, which is why the men who master it stand out so dramatically. They create relationships where women feel both safe and alive. The heavy psychological reality is that many men stay stuck in the nice guy pattern because it feels safer than risking disapproval. They would rather be liked than respected. They would rather avoid conflict than face the possibility of losing her by being fully themselves. But that choice guarantees the exact rejection they fear. Women eventually lose respect for men who have no respect for their own boundaries. This is the part they never wanted you to know about modern dating. The nice guy doesn't finish last because women are cruel. He finishes last because he abandoned the very qualities that create genuine desire. The man who learns to maintain his edge while still leading with heart changes the entire dynamic. He stops chasing her attention and starts commanding her respect through the quiet power of self-possession. If you have ever been told you are a great guy but there is no spark, this may be why. You gave her comfort but lost the contrast that makes comfort exciting. You gave her kindness but forgot that kindness without strength eventually feels like friendship instead of romance. The shift that changes everything is internal first. It begins the moment you decide that your self-respect matters more than her temporary approval. When you make that decision, your energy changes. Your words carry more weight. Your presence becomes more solid. And women feel that shift long before you say a single word. Her lack of interest was never the problem. Your lack of self-possession was. Fix that, and the entire game changes. You made her the center of your world, rearranged your schedule around her, and gave her all your attention, yet the more space you cleared for her, the faster she seemed to disappear from your life. This is the third brutal truth about female psychology that destroys more relationships than almost anything else. When a woman senses that she has become your entire purpose, something in her begins to pull away. Not because she doesn't want to be loved, but because being someone's entire world creates an overwhelming pressure she never asked for. She wants to be important to you. She does not want to be responsible for your happiness, your identity, or your sense of meaning. The moment you make a woman your mission, you lose the very quality that made her interested in the first place. Women are psychologically wired to be drawn to men who have their own direction, their own purpose, their own life that exists independently of them. When that independent life disappears and she becomes the center of your universe, her attraction fades because the dynamic has become unbalanced. She starts to feel like your mother instead of your partner. What changes everything is understanding that the most attractive men are not the ones who revolve around women. They are the ones who build something meaningful for themselves and then invite the right woman to join them on that journey. This is not about neglecting her. It is about refusing to abandon yourself. The man who has a mission, who wakes up with purpose, who continues growing even while in a relationship, creates a completely different energy than the man who waits for her text to decide how his day will feel. Female psychology responds powerfully to this kind of directed energy. When a woman sees that you have a life, goals, and standards that exist separately from her, it removes the pressure of having to be your emotional regulator. She can relax into the relationship instead of feeling responsible for your fulfillment. This relaxation is where genuine desire is born. A woman cannot desire a man she feels responsible for. The reason this truth is so heavy is because it forces men to confront how much of their behavior has been motivated by fear of abandonment. You canceled plans with friends to be available for her. You stopped pursuing your own goals because you wanted to show her she was the priority. You made her the center of your emotional world. Each of these choices seemed loving at the time, but they quietly communicated one dangerous message. My life only has meaning if you choose me. Women feel that message at a subconscious level, and it triggers their deepest fears about being trapped by someone else's emotional needs. Many women have stories of watching men slowly lose themselves in the relationship and then resenting the woman for it later. They have felt the slow dread of realizing they have become someone's entire world. That realization almost always leads to emotional withdrawal. The shift that changes everything begins when you take your focus off her and place it back on becoming the strongest version of yourself. When you rebuild your purpose, your discipline, your social circle, and your self-respect, you stop needing her validation. And paradoxically, that is when she becomes most likely to give it freely. This is not manipulation. This is alignment. You are finally living as the man you were meant to be instead of the man you thought she wanted. The psychological reality here is clear. Attraction thrives in the presence of healthy independence. When a man has a rich life, strong values, and a clear direction, he creates space for a woman to enter without feeling like she has to carry him. The man who makes her his entire purpose leaves her no space to breathe. She feels the weight of his emotional dependence and slowly begins to suffocate. Women in their 20s to their 60s have felt this pressure more times than they can count. Many of you have pulled away from men who seemed perfect on paper but made you feel responsible for their emotional state. You didn't want to hurt them. You simply couldn't carry the weight of being their everything. The men who kept their own purpose while loving you were the ones who kept your respect and desire. This is the part they never wanted you to understand about modern relationships. The quickest way to lose a woman's interest is to make her your sole source of meaning. The fastest way to regain it is to build a meaningful life that exists whether she chooses you or not. That independence is not coldness. It is the foundation of real masculine strength. If you have been wondering why your efforts to show her how much she means to you keep backfiring, this may be the answer you have been avoiding. You were giving her the wrong kind of attention. You were making her your purpose instead of inviting her into yours. The final truth will show you exactly how to turn her lack of interest into lasting attraction without ever chasing her again. You finally accepted that she wasn't interested, and in that painful moment of letting go, something unexpected happened. The very act of releasing her began to change everything in ways you never saw coming. This is the final truth about female psychology that separates the men who stay stuck from the ones who transform rejection into their greatest advantage. When a woman loses interest and you respond by accepting it with dignity instead of fighting it with desperation, you trigger something deep in her awareness. Not because she suddenly wants you, but because you have become the rare man who values himself enough to walk away without bitterness or begging. That level of self-respect is magnetic in a world full of men who fall apart when rejected. What changes everything is not finding the perfect words to win her back. It is becoming the kind of man who no longer needs to win her back to feel whole. This is the ultimate psychological shift. The moment you genuinely accept her lack of interest and redirect all that energy into your own growth, your entire presence transforms. You stop being the man who was trying to prove his worth. You become the man who already knows his worth. Women notice this change at a subconscious level. They feel the difference between a man who is waiting for their validation and a man who has stopped needing it. The man who walks away with dignity and continues building his life creates curiosity, respect, and sometimes even renewed interest. But more importantly, he creates a version of himself that attracts better connections in the future. This is not a tactic. This is maturity. The psychological mechanism here is powerful. When you stop chasing someone who is pulling away, you break the pattern of neediness that was killing the attraction. You demonstrate emotional strength. You show that your happiness is not dependent on any one person's approval. Women are drawn to this kind of emotional sovereignty because it represents the safety and freedom they have been looking for. A man who can lose a woman without losing himself becomes someone worth wanting. This truth is heavy because it requires you to do the one thing most men fear most: genuinely let go. Not pretend to let go while secretly hoping she returns. Not let go while checking her social media every day. Truly release the outcome and invest that energy in becoming better. The men who do this work discover something profound. The pain of rejection becomes the fuel for their greatest transformation. They become stronger, clearer, more purposeful, and more attractive to the right women. Women listening to this have seen this pattern play out many times. Many of you have lost interest in a man only to become strangely drawn to him again once he stopped chasing. Not because of games, but because his acceptance of your decision showed a level of self-respect that most men never develop. You watched him grow while you moved on, and part of you respected him more for it. This is the quiet power of dignified detachment. The complete picture of what changes everything when she is not interested is this. You stop trying to change her mind and start changing yourself completely. You build your body, your mind, your purpose, your boundaries, and your emotional strength. You become so rooted in your own value that her lack of interest no longer defines you. And paradoxically, this is often when women begin to reconsider their decision, not because you manipulated them, but because you finally became the man they were looking for all along. The mentor truth most men will never hear is that her rejection was never about you not being enough. It was about you not yet being rooted enough in yourself. Every time a woman pulls away, she is giving you the perfect opportunity to become the strongest version of yourself. The men who take that opportunity rarely stay single for long. The men who fight against it repeat the same painful cycle for years. You now have the complete understanding of what actually changes everything. It was never about better lines or perfect timing. It was always about becoming the kind of man whose value comes from within instead of from her response. The man who leads with strength instead of neediness. The man who maintains his purpose instead of making her his purpose. The man who can lose with dignity and grow from the loss. Her lack of interest was never the end of your story. It was the beginning of your transformation. The only question left is whether you will use this moment as fuel to become unstoppable or as evidence that you are not enough. Now I want to ask you a personal question. Be honest in the comments. When a woman has lost interest in you, what has been your usual pattern and what is one thing you will do differently starting today? If this video hit you deeply or gave you the clarity you needed, like it, subscribe for more raw truths on male and female psychology, dating dynamics, and self-improvement, and share it with a friend who is struggling with rejection and needs to hear this.